Again. Are you ready?
Ready.
Extremely loud.
Meep.
Stop it.
Beep, beep, beep. Dara doesn't like my silly faces.
Okay.
Wait till it shows up. Wait.
All right.
There's
Hi
probably
everyone.
nobody in the
It's
chat.
time for round two. Round two.
Oh, Nordrod Zero is in.
There are 4 people that I believe saw that, Lawrence. And they have now been scarred for life.
No, they haven't.
Scarred for life.
No, they haven't.
It's all right, Barry. We hopefully now everything is going to go smoothly.
Yeah.
Hopefully. I see a rock solid, consistent sending rate, and Lauren is being a child.
I was built with a rubber face, and I like to use it. Think of me as the female Jim Carrey. My face is just made for making faces.
Okay, well, maybe another time. Maybe another time. All right, so today we're going to be talking about Final Fantasy 15 universe, because it's a very interesting topic, and I don't think we've talked about any of the live chats really in any detail.
And Lois James, as for what you've missed.
You've missed very little, because we've had 20 minutes of our internet failing and trying to get it sorted.
And Lauren is trying to entertain.
Before we go on to the Final
face.
Fantasy 15 universe, though, Shadow Walsh, pretty excited for Jekt.
Yes.
That's what I really have to say about that.
Yes. Also, in case you didn't see, birthday. It's Braden's birthday. Braden, our writer on the site's birthday. So be sure to send him some love, because he is amazing.
Well, Jamie, that is actually one of the preemptive reasons why we're talking about the Final Fantasy 15 universe today, and we will get on to that in a bit, because before we get on to anything relating to what's going to come up with the Final Fantasy 15 universe, I just want to get your opinions first on what's been your favourite part of the Final Fantasy 15 universe, whether Brotherhood, Kingsglaive, any of the DLC, the downloadable mobile games. Well, what's been your favourite part so far? Because I think out of all of the compilation of Final Fantasy 7 still is by far way bigger than the Final Fantasy 15 universe.
Yeah.
Although I think it's catching up quite quickly. There's loads of different parts to the universe, and I think there's different parts that appeal to different people.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got the anime, you've got a massive big budget movie, you've got the different downloadable content, you've got the kind of prequel novel that they put out. There's the mobile games. There's quite a few mobile games actually.
Mm-hmm.
What's been your favorite so far? In terms of, I don't really know. Just in general, I guess. Because some of it has, I guess, from a narrative perspective, there's kind of pros and cons to the different approaches they've taken.
Shoot.
What?
I just sent Braden's.
Put it to Braden.
Yeah, that's the new stream, guys. Head on over to Braden's Twitter.
What's your favorite part of the universe, Lauren?
I don't know.
That's a good answer.
Because if I had to choose one thing that I really liked about the Final Fantasy 15 universe, I'd say probably the main game. The Brotherhood was okay. I just kind of got tired of how long it was taking for it to be released. And
I think that's a good point, actually, because Brotherhood, obviously, when they announced it during the Uncovered event, the first episode went up pretty soon after. It got a massive amount of hype and tons of people watched it. But then that was end of March.
Yeah.
They had to wait until mid-June for the next episode,
it's
2.5 months for the next episode, which
from... Well, no, continue with what you're saying, sorry.
I just think with that kind of promotional campaign, the hype was lost so much. By the time we got episode 5, which came out, I think a couple of weeks before the game actually launched, you can see the drop off in just the views. I think the first part has like 2.5 million views, and the last part has like a couple of 100,000.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, I don't really understand other than the fact that they like seem to want to try and correlate it with events that were happening. But like because they were so short, they might as well have just released it like a normal TV show, like consecutive weeks. But yeah, it's just a shame.
I think it was they kind of made a slightly mistake in the fact that they tried to have this kind of consistent story, but then that was only really apparent in the first and last episodes.
Yeah.
And then the other ones in between had no real relation to that consistent story. They were
it
was just trying to add
introducing people,
trying to add some
the
depth to the character relations and how they felt about Noctis. Because I mean, really, prior to Final Fantasy 15, the Noctis has individual relationships with the characters, but they basically don't know each other. Like Ignis and Gladiolus know each other kind of because they're both Crown's guards, but they have very different roles within the Crown's Guard.
Yeah.
And Prompto has no idea who Gladiolus and Ignis are at all.
Yeah.
And only really gets to know them a couple of weeks before Final Fantasy 15 actually happens.
Yeah. And Jin, I do like. I'm a bit sad about Kingsglaive, really, because I felt it would be. I thought that like graphically it was gorgeous, but I felt like it could have been a better tie-in to the game if like certain facts were a bit like right.
Yeah.
If there was some communication. Like it's a shame that there's so many like inconsistencies between Kingsglaive and then the main game itself. I mean,
but
there's so
there's
much
inconsistencies with regards to the cutscenes in Final Fantasy 15 too.
Yeah.
I mean, you can tell that I think it's Nezue who directed all of like Kingsglaive and all of the movies within Final Fantasy 15, and like the Kingsglaive montage that happens, the Omen trailer when it appears, like the actual FMV cutscenes that happen within Final Fantasy 15. They're quite different from everything else that happens within the game, and there is a big disconnect there.
Yeah. To be honest, though, MS Finale, I actually kind of liked what we saw of Tenebrae. That was actually one of my more memorable moments of the game, was walking around the small part of Tenebrae that we could, and just seeing the castle going up in flames in the background. And the music as well. It was just a very bittersweet.
Well, like the two times we ever see Tenebrae in Kingsglaive and in Final Fantasy 15, it's on fire.
Yeah, essentially. But like I just thought that it was very sad and everything that was going on. I just thought that it was really like that whole sequence. I felt something. Like I felt sad.
Kingsglaive, in the grand scheme of things, didn't even remotely need to exist.
Yeah.
Because it introduced a load of characters that have no relationship or have no bearing on Final Fantasy 15. The only real part of it is how Luna gets the ring.
Yeah.
That's the only actual reason it exists. It's just showing how Luna gets the ring, because Kingsglaive as a concept aren't even in Final Fantasy 15.
Yeah.
Drautus has a 2 seconds of screen time. Nyx is the same, and the majority of the other things just don't. There's even Idolus doesn't. Nothing that happens in Kingsglaive is referenced apart from what happens to Regis.
No, and that's what it is. What makes me really sad. But yeah, no, Paul, I do agree. It's just they're just like, look at all the stuff that we're gonna give you, and then we're just like, but yeah, we didn't really. Like, I think that's the thing that annoys me the most about just the way that Square Enix handled it, was the fact that we didn't ask for an anime. We didn't ask for Kingsglaive. All we really asked for was Final Fantasy 15. And I feel like partially because they did so much stuff and had so many ways in which Final Fantasy 15 was spread out, it's almost like we just got really more we got a bit more disappointed, because all we wanted was a really good game, and what we got was an okay game, and then the surrounding universe.
And to answer your
We'd
question,
never asked for this.
to answer your question, Nyx and Luna have better chemistry than Noctis and Luna because they have more screen time together.
Yeah, but I thought that too, and I thought that it was really nice between Nyx and Luna, actually. I was really kind of liking that.
And it's worrying to think that they actually have more screen time than Noctis and Luna do.
I know.
Noctis and Luna, the only time they are actually ever on screen... are they ever on screen at the same time?
Yeah, well, kind of. He's there during the speech.
But
they have the child version.
Yeah.
And then when they're fighting Leviathan and she's cradling him and stuff. Oh, thank you, Elizeel Gaming.
Last cost. What are you referring to when Tabata said he wanted it to surpass Final Fantasy VII? I know he said that he wanted 15 to surpass the sales of Final Fantasy VII, or at least that was their objective.
But like that's the thing. I mean, if what you're saying is about that, it's like it's a shame because it just felt like the wrong way to go about it. 7 was 7 because 7 existed first. Like the rest of the universe was created well after. So it's just like they just threw too much out there too fast.
Yeah, and I mean, like, Brotherhood wasn't even planned.
No.
Even remotely planned.
No.
And it was only when a Fuji-san kind of said, maybe we should just do an anime. We should do an anime. And everyone was like, yeah.
And I mean, in a way, like, I mean, I thought that it did really set up the characters well. And I didn't mind Brotherhood, really. For that. I really like...
even though like people were complaining about the fact they used the bad animation studio, right? The ones that did the Persona anime.
Oh, yeah, but I didn't mind. Yeah, I didn't mind the animation. Granted, it's always hard to judge. It's always hard to judge anime's like direction and stuff when it's not in your native language. I feel like, because like if we were Japanese or we were fluent in Japanese, we would know if the intonations and the way that they were speaking was wrong. But like for us, we were just kind of like, all right, well,
Jamie, they are absolutely trying to make it like the Final Fantasy compilation of Final Fantasy 7.
Yeah.
It's been their strategy since 2002, 2003. There's the whole we've talked about it on the channel numerous times, but they created this thing called polymorphic content, which is where they aim to exploit a single property and create a universe around it. So for most of the games that they have coming up, or anything that they feel has the potential to grow, they will try and make as many properties around it as possible to try and... But like the whole thing is that it's not necessarily a new concept in that most of the time you get something that's successful, and then you might spawn something out of that because it's successful, because people want more, there's more demand. But with the way that Square Enix decided to do it with polymorphic content is that everything is pre-planned. And the reason that Final Fantasy 15 kind of went wrong with that is if you think back to when it was announced as Final Fantasy Versus 13, they came up with the polymorphic concept of Fabula Nova Crystallis. Now that was supposed to be like the precursor to everything. They announced 3 games at the same time that were going to have a shared mythology. They announced a 4th, which was Heresis, that then got canned. But if you think that out of those 3 games, everything that we've spawned has been crazy, because Type 0 has now on 3 or 4, maybe 5 games, I think it is. There's obviously Final Fantasy 13 had 3 games, the prequel novels, all that stuff, and then Final Fantasy 15 is now on like 10 different properties.
Yeah.
So the Fabula Nova Crystallis franchise is got to be on like 20-ish, maybe 25 different properties related to it, which is quite crazy when you think about it.
Yeah. But yeah, as for what's happening at Gamescom, I mean, yeah, it's really up in the air as to what they are going to be showing off. My guess, and I might be wrong, obviously, but it's maybe it's the Final Fantasy 15 PC version. I mean, because they have been hinting at it. And it would be something that's pretty big, but not too big. I mean, I know there's some people who are really adamant about like World of Versus, but I almost feel like they might not do that because, well, like just how much time it would take to do something like that. But yeah. I do feel like the PC version of Final Fantasy 15 might be a good shout. More information on Monster of the Deep and quiz results, survey results.
I don't think the NX or anything to do with this.
No, we've gone on that with a ton. This stuff was all in place beforehand.
The reason that we're in this position now with Square Enix, specifically with Square's side of the business, is because of Sakaguchi, essentially.
Yeah.
They lost so much money on the Spirits Within that they had to figure out ways that they could try and claw it back.
Yeah. And they just keep trying different things and hoping that one of them will stick. And really, Final Fantasy 15 is something that's been done really well.
The Western side has kind of managed to do it. Like Tomb Raider has... The recent Tomb Raider games have been good. Like the Deus Ex games have been good quality. Hitman game, they haven't been like stellar games. They haven't really been like world beaters, but they've been good standard. Whereas the Japanese side of Square Enix has just been kind of throwing out games that are, by the wider public, considered kind of mediocre.
Yeah, they've been throwing out so many tribute games recently. But I think it's also because they've just been really changing gears, and they've been focusing on the mobile market because it's so big in Japan. But the thing is that they do make a lot of money on mobile games. Like they make loads of money on mobile games. But I do think that they've spread themselves out a bit too far with the mobile games. I mean, I think it would be great if they could focus some of the BDs back onto console games, but I think they just try to do too much.
Yeah.
At one time.
So I mean, like, if you had to rate it as a success or a failure, we've got 75 people in here, 77 people in here now. How do you guys? If it was like a binary option, success, failure, would you say that the Final Fantasy 15 universe has been a success or a failure? Where would you go with that, Lauren? Do you think it's been a success or a failure?
What, the universe?
The universe concept.
For me personally, and I hate to be a Debbie Downer, but like, I don't think it was a success for me because
so you think it's a failure?
The properties weren't coherent with the main game. Kingsglaive had a lot of glaring errors between the properties. The only one that was really solid was the connection between Brotherhood and Final Fantasy 15. That was the only one that seemed logical. But I do feel like the way that they've handled this content is going to make fans quite pessimistic in the future if they try to do this with any future Final Fantasy.
I mean, the reason
title.
why, like, I don't necessarily mind the concept of a universe.
I don't at all. I don't mind a sequel.
I just think that it's one of those things where if they'd actually planned it out correctly and thought, okay, so we have the game, and we're going like back 3-4 years ago here, right? So if they said, we've got the game, we want to do some other stuff, right? We want to have an anime series, we want to have a movie, we want to have a mobile game, we want to have some DLC. Actually plan it out and think about how the narrative is going to work with each other.
Exactly.
Whereas what they did was they were like, okay, we've got a game, we need to change the story a little bit. Well, why don't we just take some of the story out, make it into a movie that doesn't really have any relation, and oh, you know what we should do? We should do like some kind of anime thing. That would be a great promotional tool.
Oh, hi, Spencer.
And then we're gonna have a mobile game that you can also play in the game that's gonna come out. And then there's gonna be another mobile game that they're gonna talk about in the game. Mm-hmm. But that's not even gonna come out until a year after the game's launch. That's a great idea. Mm-hmm. Like everything that they tried to do with the Final Fantasy 15 universe has basically just been a really bad idea. Even to the point where Kingsglaive was supposed to come out like a month before to build up hype around the game, and then the game got delayed.
Yeah.
Pretty much everything they tried to do with it just didn't work.
I know.
Like King's Knight was so bad that they had to, after the alpha that was taking place in Asia, they had to just cancel it and go back to the drawing board. Like that's how bad the game was. Like people just didn't like it at all.
Yeah.
Justice Monsters 5 got cancelled after 6 months. Like, A New Empire is just causing mass hate amongst the fan base.
I know, but the problem is that so many people are buying it, which is what Square are really focusing on at the moment. And it's annoying because, like, you know, you can sit here and we can preach about, like, what we believe the series should be and that kind of stuff. But when people keep buying it and they see people keep buying it and like they just don't care otherwise. I mean, just look at the way that Square Enix treats fan sites and treats its fans in general. I mean, you think about the fact that like they are more willing to go to IGN with their exclusive content and Game Informer with their exclusive content, which is fine. But the thing is that Final Fantasy is not mainstream, and it will not ever be a mainstream series. As much as we love it, and as much as there's so many people who love it, like if you ask a random gamer out on the street who just identifies as a gamer, if they know Final Fantasy, like chances are they might not know one. They might not know Final Fantasy, or if they know Final Fantasy, they've just only heard of it.
That is why they're going to the IGNs.
That is why they're trying to, but it's almost like a fox in sheep's clothing. Like, I love the fact that there's companies like Atlas who embrace who they are. They are not trying to be anybody else except for them.
They build from word of mouth, right?
Exactly.
So they produce a good game. The publications will talk about it. But like you can guarantee that like Atlas, like Persona games don't get much coverage on the bigger publications. They'll get some,
but people love them and they have a lot of heart in them.
But it's the same with like the Koei Tecmo as well. Nice games, like I know that Square Enix are considered a bigger publisher and they're in the same kind of position as Capcom, where they have a mega franchise. It has some global appeal. It used to be a superstar, and they're desperately trying to get those glory days back. Because Resident Evil is very similar, and Sega also have Sonic the Hedgehog. Like they kind of have these franchises, but like the Dynasty Warriors franchise, like they know their fan base. They keep growing them. They're trying to grow them as best as they can.
Like everybody who's saying that Final Fantasy is mainstream, like that's fair enough. Like, you know, we have this sort of weird, because we're in it, we have a sort of weird perception of how big Final Fantasy is, but in the reality of things, Call of Duty sells millions and millions without the drop of the hat. Fallout sells millions and millions with the drop of the hat. Like EA games sell millions and millions.
That's the easiest comparison you can make, right? Because you'd think that Fallout is a pretty niche franchise in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
But they can announce a Fallout game 6 months before launch and have it sell over 10 million copies easy with very limited promotion.
Yeah.
Whereas Final Fantasy 15
they had one mobile game.
They had Shelter, yeah.
Yeah.
Which wasn't even related to Fallout.
No.
But with Final Fantasy 15, the game was in development for 10 years, right?
Yeah. So
people have been talking about it for a long period of time. They've had the re-announcements. They've had so much promotional stuff taking place. They have the active time reports. So much news. They had a massive mega event like no one in the industry had ever seen before for Uncovered. And yet they still struggled to even match what The Witcher 3 has sold. Like Final Fantasy 15 has got to be on about 7 million copies sold right now, which is a good figure,
and like,
but it's not great.
And like something that Daryl and I sort of discussed outside of this, we were just discussing the fact that Final Fantasy's only just come to 135 million copies sold over its lifetime. So consider that's 25 years. Minecraft's been able to do more than that in the short amount of time that it's existed. Like, when was Minecraft first released?
2010, maybe?
Minecraft was first released in 2009. In under 10 years, Minecraft has been able to sell more copies than Final Fantasy in its entire lifetime. And that is something that's worth talking about. Like, I mean, and I know that people are saying, well, it's a JRPG, but the thing is, it's an RPG, but the thing is that it's specifically a JRPG, and it does not suit to a wider audience's tastes.
But it did. Final Fantasy VII was the kind of the
pinnacle. That one was like the pinnacle. That's like the sort of, that was the entry point. That was the one that a lot of people played. If they played an RPG, generally they probably played Final Fantasy VII. But there's still a lot of people who've never even heard of Final Fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, Final Fantasy 15 kind of, because of the mass marketing they did reach a wider generic audience. But yeah, I mean, with all of the money they spent on that game, like the marketing for that game was insane. Like the budgets.
They like got, you know,
they made a custom Audi. They
got like so much, and yet they still didn't sell even close to what Fallout sold. And Fallout is pretty mainstream when you think about it.
And also the fact that,
in
like
comparison,
we were saying, Sonic the Hedgehog was sold like 210 million copies.
Yeah.
And you've got to think, like, what's the best-selling Sonic game?
Yeah.
Like,
I know. Sonic has sold more copies in its lifetime than Final Fantasy has.
By a significant margin.
By a significant margin. And if you consider about how big a joke that Sonic had become in its lifetime, it still managed to sell more.
SF Player Dude, Final Fantasy 15, it depends on how you want to look at it. I mean, it's sold okay. I mean, it sold 6 to 7 million copies at the moment from what we gather. They were expecting to sell 10. Like they want to sell 10 in its lifetime. And it may sell more when like the PC launch comes out.
Yeah.
And
if it does.
And like if they do a Game of the Year edition, like there's other avenues that it can sell.
Like they're doing well in porting it to various places, so like everybody can sort of play it. You know, you can play it on through PSN, through Steam. So they really are trying to expand the amount of places where you can play Final Fantasy games, which does make it good. But the thing is that it takes those new fans to go and play the older games as well, and there's not probably a lot of like if you consider new people, I don't know how many of them would go back and play through the entirety of Final Fantasy 1 unless they were really passionate about the series.
Final Fantasy 7 has sold, I think, 12 million at the moment. Around that.
I like Matt. Matt's really nice, and Kiori is really sweet.
I think the problem they've had with Square Enix Presents is just there seems to be a lack of planning.
Yeah,
but then
and that's
I think
sort of Square Enix in general.
I think it's really easy to sit here though and say oh my god, it's so terrible. But they have to plan effectively like 3 days worth of content, and this year they had almost nothing to talk about.
Yeah. I think it's a very difficult job.
My issue with the Square Enix Presents is that they didn't need to do it this year. There was nothing to talk about.
Yeah, but my biggest issue with everything is just the fact that they don't involve. I mean, I don't know how much of this is just, you know, who it is pulling the strings or whatever, but I don't think they do enough with the fans. I don't think they show the fans that they love them, really. They just say, here you go, you can buy this stuff. And
well, I mean, there's the collector's editions just kind of show that to a T. They're just every single one is pretty much the same. You're gonna get a bust. You're gonna get a cheap soundtrack. You're gonna get an art book, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that I think Yoshi P is doing really well with Final Fantasy XIV. I think the fact that he, regardless if he actually believes in it or not, like the fact that he, you know, holds these events.
Hold on. Oh. Sorry, Paoleo. Yes, Final Fantasy 15 was the fastest Final Fantasy to reach the 6 million mark, but it was also one of the slowest selling Final Fantasy games in Japan. I think it managed to just about beat Final Fantasy 5. From what I remember correctly, it's been one of the worst Final Fantasy games in Japan in terms of sales. And the reason it sold so quickly is because they just did the marketing, but like there was nowhere near what they were expecting to sell.
Also, it's kind of hard to compare the two because the environments are so different in which games are being sold nowadays. Like, I mean, you think about how accessible games are now. Final Fantasy games, like, you're considering that every Final Fantasy game was sold worldwide when they were first sold. This is the first one that was sold worldwide. This was the first one.
It's a very deceptive figure.
It is, and it's not a good one to go by because if you consider the fact that like Europe wasn't able to get like which game, you weren't able to get anything before 7, were you?
No.
They weren't able to get anything before Final Fantasy 7 for ages. Like, at all.
Well,
so
the releases were always staggered.
You think about the fact that Final Fantasy, that's 6 games that were not even released in Europe before Final Fantasy 7. Whoa! Whoa! That is the... You guys can't see, but that is the biggest moth.
Like,
oh my
big.
God.
It's got like red wings and stuff.
That is sickening. Oh my God.
Had orange eyes.
Whoa. Oh, the spider is just like, get me out of here. That was insane. That was a crazy spider.
I mean, Square Enix, it's a weird situation for them because obviously Japan is their home market. They want to succeed in their market, and from what we've seen from other games that have come out recently, there is still the opportunity for Japanese games to sell. I mean, I know the console market is diminishing somewhat, and Square Enix, for a long period of time, have basically said that their interests don't lie in the Japanese market anymore, but they clearly care about them. They clearly care about what they think, because we've seen that with kind of what happened after Final Fantasy 15 launched. They saw the Japanese public wasn't happy. They instantly went on the defensive.
The Red Wings.
Like Tabata started like kind of doing all this stuff, like saying we're going to be making all these changes to the game. We're going to be doing this. We're going to be doing that. Like the versus chapter 13 verse 2 kind of press release that was put out very soon after launch was in response to the Japanese reaction to the game. It wasn't the Western reaction to the game, it was the Japanese reaction to the game. That press release was put out in Japanese well before it appeared in English.
And that's the thing as well that's really a shame. Like, for some reason, Square Enix just treats America... They really want to break into the American market. Why are they not releasing translated versions of the Ultimanias? Why do they not translate them into English? But yeah, no, that moth was cool.
The craziest moth I've ever seen.
That was a cool looking moth, though. And there's a yellow one. There's a green one now. But no, that was a really cool looking moth.
Oh, that was like...
What?
It's a little green.
I know, he's really cute. We get like really cute moths. We get like really fuzzy ones. But like, yeah, I mean, like that's one of my biggest things is that, yeah, that emoji, it's pretty sickening. But like, the Ultimanias provide so much more information on backgrounds, on interviews with the directors and creators. Hey, Septimus. Like, why do they treat us in such a way that they just don't think that we deserve it or that we would even be interested in it?
I mean, that's the point with a chill chatter blog. I mean, with the mobile games, like the fact that they have the Japanese version and the non-Japanese version, like I just find that so ridiculous. Does anyone else think that that's just weird? The fact that they just have a separate version for Japan. And at this year's E3, they announced like every single thing happens in the Japanese game first. And at this year's E3, they announced that I think Brave Exvius was going to be having 2 characters that were going to appear in the global version before the Japanese version, and they had to like go on a massive damage control saying like, guys, don't worry, it's not the end of the world, you're going to get these characters eventually. It's like we've been having to put up with the fact that like, what is going on?
I know, it's like we want to really please Western fans, but we don't actually care about what you guys.
Well, I think, I mean, on that note, Vicky, the Zodiac Age came out in Japan after the Western release, right? And then I know Dissidia is coming out slightly before, but you know that they are moving to more towards simultaneous release dates. And you know, with the way that things progress, it wouldn't surprise me if they start to favor the Western audience over the Japan in terms of release dates.
I mean, you say that about Ultimania's Chill Caliblog. I never can remember how to pronounce that. But either way, like, I mean, it still would sell, I think. I still feel like an Ultimania would sell.
Well, I mean, essentially, it's the comparison. Like, our guidebooks over in the West get put together by Brady Games and Piggyback. In Japan, the Ultimanias are their guidebooks.
Yeah.
And they're so much better. They get multiple versions of them. Some of them are related to the story.
They could sell them alongside... They could sell translated versions alongside the collector's editions. Like they used to do. And they don't. And it's really a shame. And I don't have the time to translate an entire Ultimania. Like, I don't have the time for that. And then also just the fact that, like, mistranslation.
I think that's the whole thing AGB like... Gaming. And we've been saying it for a while. It's that... I mean, I don't know how many of you guys in the chat would agree with this, but I personally got into Final Fantasy because I didn't like Western RPGs. I liked Japanese RPGs, and Final Fantasy to me was the one that drew me into that genre of gaming. I didn't like playing Western RPGs, and I still don't really like playing Western RPGs. The only one I can really tolerate is Mass Effect, and then they went and ruined that. Like, I can play the Fallout games and Elder Scrolls. I can't even think of any other Western RPGs. Like The Witcher, I guess. But I don't really like them that much. Like I've tried Neverwinter, I've tried the Dragon Age games. I just don't really get on with them. I don't like the sense of freedom. Like, I'd rather just do the story. I don't want to like be distracted by 20 billion things happening around the world.
Don't get me wrong. Like, I don't care about, like, I don't need it to be a Western RPG. I don't need the Final Fantasy games to be a Western RPG. All I want is, and it's exactly what they want. They want to appeal to a Western audience. Western audiences, we want our Japanese... There are fans of Japanese RPGs in the West. We just want our Japanese games, but we just want something to be translated so that we can actually enjoy them. That's all I want.
I think that's the problem, because they're Japanese game developers. They have a style. It works really well for them. The Japanese public really like the style.
But they're almost like ashamed of it. Yeah, and it's in like the West.
They're like, oh well, this is what people in North America want to buy. Let's make that, instead of thinking, well, this is what we're really good at making. Let's do that. Like and this is, I think, Dirge Cerberus, to me, when I was researching about the kind of how it was conceptualized, Dirge Cerberus is the epitome of what went wrong with Square Enix. It was Yoshinori Kitase saying, we need to make a third-person shooter. Why? You've never made a third-person shooter before, Yoshinori Kitase. Square Enix has never made a third-person shooter before, to my knowledge at that point. And then I think even it was IGN was saying, the Japanese public don't like first-person shooters, and they don't like third-person shooters. Why are you making a third-person shooter? Yeah. And he was like, well, because North Americans really like third-person shooters, and we're going to use this game to try and make Japanese people like third-person shooters. And it's like, but why would you do that? Like, it's not anything you have a remote degree of experience with. If you're going to try and do that and make it so that this game is what gives the Japanese public a taste of third-person shooters, you have to make it really damn good. Yeah. And they didn't. They made a really shoddy game that they then had to like massively change for the Western release, which like I've never seen another game go through that many changes between releasing Japan and North America. Like, they changed a ton of it.
Yeah.
Like, it was, they had to speed up the entire game. They changed game mechanics. They took out parts of the story. They made a ton of changes. And it's like, why couldn't you just have made a game that you knew that you could comfortably make and you were really passionate about, and that you know people are gonna enjoy in the market you're trying to sell it to?
Sean, are you talking about Urgeis? Is that the fighting game that you're going on about? That was a great fighting game. Urgeis
was a great fighting game. No, I like the
Urgeis.
Urgeis is like RPG mode was pretty fun.
Yeah. They're just scared. Like, I mean, Vicky, I think it all comes down to the fact that they just want to sell as much as they can and not feel like they're falling behind. But, like, I just don't think recently Square Enix has felt very comfortable in their identity. And I don't know that their staff are up to snuff with how to create what they sort of think we want them to create.
Well, the stupid thing is, right, so Final Fantasy 13 had a really dynamic battle system that you could easily still consider as turn-based, and it sold reasonably well. People's biggest complaint was the story. If Final Fantasy 13 had a solid story that was on par with the previous games, everyone would have been happy with it. And they didn't understand that. They didn't understand that there were no from what I can gather, like, there were no real complaints with Final Fantasy 13's battle system. Like, it was an advancement of Final Fantasy X Part 2's battle system, which was an advancement of Final Fantasy X's battle system. It was still turn-based. They just made it a bit more dynamic. They incorporated some stuff that started becoming popular with the Persona franchise. There was a lot more emphasis on status effects and buffs and debuffs, but it was still turn-based. It was still turn-based.
Yeah.
But they bodged up the story, and that's what everyone remembered. The fact that there were no towns, that it was linear, like these kind of things that just kind of soured it.
Yeah.
But the gameplay system was fine. But then they were suddenly like, oh no, we've got to go like real-time battle now because action RPGs are the way that... It's like, but no one ever said that. No one ever said that a turn-based battle system can't work.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, with regards to Final Fantasy VII, I don't know if it's necessarily a case of them trying to make it westernized. I think it's more so just that
it's Nomura.
Nomura likes action RPGs, and action RPGs seem to be the way that Final Fantasy has been going for a while, or at least Square Enix with their Japanese RPGs. They just really seem to... You have two guys who really like action RPGs more than they like turn-based battle systems, really. You have Tabata and you have Nomura. And, you know, really the last one left who hasn't been doing anything is Ito. And then you have Toriyama in the wings. And, like, yeah, the boys are action RPG focused.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. The people that are kind of leading the decisions at Square Enix now are action. They love action RPGs.
Yeah.
But the thing is that they have almost no experience making them.
Yeah. And the staff that they have, like, the older staff, they don't have that much experience making them either.
All you have to do is just look at the fact that the best action RPG that Square Enix have made was not made by Square Enix, Nier Automata. Platinum Games are a very, very good developer. They can make lots of different franchises, all types of genres. Like Vanquish Vanquish is one of the most polished games I think I've ever played. And it was a third-person shooter made by a Japanese developer. And if you listen to what everyone says about Japanese developers, they'll say that they can't do anything, like they're so far behind. But Platinum Games are geniuses. Yeah. They are geniuses.
I mean, even on top of that, like, just, you know, Japan does have talent in that type of thing. I mean, you know, the Dark Souls genre as well is much more Western than... It's much more Western than it is sort of quote-unquote Japanese. But Square Enix just hasn't been able to... They just don't seem comfortable in what they are. I mean, Atlas, I think, does it best with regards to testing different genres. Like, the thing is that Persona has always been the same. It's like Persona has always been a turn-based battle system with minor upgrades as it's gone on. I can't quote on the Shin Megami Tensei series because I have not played that. But the Persona series onward I have played. And it has been action based. It's been I'm getting really tired. Turn-based battle systems, JRPG style. But they have other games, like they have there was the game where you were performing surgery. Oh, what was that one called?
Trauma Team. Yeah,
you have Trauma Team, and then you also have Catherine, which is like a puzzle game.
I think,
and then you also have
the thing that they haven't realized is that they're trying to go for the massive market, and to do that, they feel like they need to have gameplay, like solid gameplay. But the whole thing is that Final Fantasy games have never really been about the gameplay. They've been about the story, and
exactly.
the story, the graphics, the technology, the music. Those, like, the presentational aspects of the game are what everyone has always like latched onto, because Final Fantasy VII's gameplay was boring. Like, it was really basic. Like, you just press X, and like there's very few strategic decisions you ever need to make.
And then you play Final Fantasy 12 where you don't have to press anything at all.
But it's like, everyone loves Final Fantasy VII because of the story, because of the characters, because of the cutscenes they had in there, because of like the exploration you could do. Like, it was still a very linear game, but there was so much exploration you could have once you get into certain parts of the game. Final Fantasy X as well, like their gameplay was very simplistic, but it didn't need to be anything. Like, because the story it's that kind of drew people in, and it's why like Nier has become kind of this cult classic, because the story was so much like Nier's gameplay is not very good. Like, it's passable.
Yeah.
But the story has made it this kind of fabled thing, and and Square Enix have just, with the last couple of mainstream Final Fantasy games, the story just hasn't been there.
No, it's almost like they've just kind of they've not taken the time to fully flesh out and make the story great. And that is why it's so frustrating when people say, oh, it's just your nostalgia talking. But the thing is that I could still play like an older Final Fantasy game and be more entertained by the story and more affected by the story than I can play Final Fantasy 15, which the story is just lukewarm at best. I mean, it's just a shame.
What do you mean I can't say it wasn't strategic? I've never really even been out. I've never, like, there's no Final Fantasy game that's really, apart from Final Fantasy 13, where it's kind of like Twitch reactions and you had to really think about the strategic side, like, on the fly. Like, Final Fantasy 7, I never once cared about elemental weaknesses or anything like that. The only time I think I ever thought about that in Final Fantasy 7 was when I was running against Lost Number, because he switches between being strong and weak against physical and magic. But aside from that, like, it's never really been that essential. Like, Final Fantasy 8, you could use the junctioning system to change your elemental weaknesses, but like, I mean, before Final Fantasy 13, I had never once used a status effect, either for or against. Protect, maybe at best.
And Lewis, I am completely with you. I'm done with Final Fantasy 15, honestly. Like, my brain is just closed off. They've inundated me with Final Fantasy 15, and I'm just ready to move on.
Yeah.
I am.
I think
I'm
Final
ready.
Fantasy 15's DLC, they were expecting to get out a lot sooner. I mean, they said it was a 12-month roadmap, but episode Ignis isn't coming out until December, which is clearly after 12 months.
Aw. Thank you, Aquan. Aqualta. It was great to have you here.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
I think we may actually round out.
Yeah, we might need to round out as well, because I'm getting like just so.
I've woken up actually.
I'm so tired.
I feel like I've got into this.
I know. I want to get into it, but I'm just so tired. Oh, that moth wore me out.
There's no more moths anymore.
No, there aren't any moths. They've gone to bed now too.
But
that was I wish I could have taken a picture of that one. That was such a cool moth. Like, seriously. If he comes back at all, I'm going to take a picture and put him on Instagram.
I swear, if they do a second season pass for Final Fantasy 15, like, that's just going to be too much.
Well, how do you guys feel about the, I mean, not to start off another tangent, but how do you feel about the fact that Dissidia has a season pass now?
We're not quite going yet. We probably should do.
Yeah.
But we're not quite going yet.
Oh, bye, guys.
Everyone's leaving us.
I know, because we said we're leaving.
Thank you, Ryan. I'm glad that you find this interesting.
Yes, thank you.
We have opinions. We say them.
We do. And sometimes people yell at us. But sometimes people are nice to us.
But yeah, I mean, from I think someone asked about the survey. I mean, we're seeing it on our videos, like as we've gone throughout the year, I think Final Fantasy 15's content is just people are just getting bored of it. It's going on too long.
Yeah.
It's going on, like, there's too many different parts going on too long, and I think everything that's happening is just kind of souring people even more.
Yeah.
Because they're not really taking feedback on board.
Bye, Nero. But yeah, no, I mean, like, as a lot of people are saying, fighting games nowadays, they do quite often have a type of season pass type deal. But yeah, no, I'm really irritated by it. I'm not a fan of the fact that, like, I've been really happy about this game, and then all of a sudden I've heard, like, oh, I have to pay £60 to get the game, but then I also have to pay an additional amount in order to, like, freaking get additional characters.
If they put Noctis as one of those, like, paid DLC characters, that's going to be so cheap.
I know. But you know what? The best thing that we all can do is to not buy the DLC. If you want to show Square Enix a message that you're not happy, don't buy it, because that is the best way to let them know that you're not interested. Granted, there might be a lot of people who do buy it, and in which case, if it sells millions of copies, then and you really feel like you want to buy the DLC, then you could probably go buy the DLC, because they've already made their money.
Well, I mean, they're clearly making enough around Dissidia anyway from the arcades, because otherwise they would have cancelled it by now.
It's just such a shame, because everybody should be able to have the same experience with a game like that.
No, Lady Vesperia, second season pass is not cool. I don't care what story they add to the game. Like, it just would not. I'd rather they focus on something fresh and original. The longer they spend on Final Fantasy 15, the harder it is for Tabata to make his new game, because he still has to have resource working on Final Fantasy 15 instead of his new game. Like, just the Final Fantasy 15 should be done by now.
Honestly, brain strip, I have no clue when they're going to announce Final Fantasy 16. I mean, they have Final Fantasy 7 Remake in their pipeline, so I don't know if maybe they won't worry about Final Fantasy 16 until Final Fantasy 7 is underway. But, like, it's really, really, really unlikely that we'll hear about Final Fantasy 16 anytime in the near future, especially since Tabata is not wanting to be a part of it. And there's not really any other directors that they want to put it on, unless, like, Ito is secretly working in a cave somewhere.
But then I don't even know which business division he's associated to
anymore.
anymore.
No. He's just kind of in a hangar.
Steve Zarif. It's not an irrelevant question. We're open to all Final Fantasy questions. Are you with or against the 13th trilogy? I would say I'm
indifferent. I don't mind it.
I liked 13.
I thought that the gameplay was really good.
I thought 13.2 corrected a lot of faults but pandered too much to the feedback, and Lightning Returns wasn't the best of games.
The thing that irritates me is that, like, there's so many people who are really adamant about their hate for Final Fantasy 13. But at least I got through that game. Final Fantasy 12, no chance. I I don't feel it. And the fact that it's number 1 or number 2 on people's lists makes me cringe because I'm just like, I feel nothing for those characters. At least I hated Hope. At least I like felt like, Hope, you are a douche and you need to, stop trying to harp on poor Snow. And I liked Lightning as a character. I liked the characters of Final Fantasy 13. I liked Zaz. I liked Fang. I liked Final Fantasy 13, and I don't think it deserves the hate that it's getting.
Boxrick. Any ideas why they're using Unreal Engine 4 over Luminous? That's, from what I gather, is pretty clear. It's that Luminous engine is kind of Tabata's technology, so they're going to be using it for a lot of stuff, like his business division. But the other divisions are using Unreal Engine because it's much easier for them to work on and get up to speed with.
And the reason why I think it's just because he's not necessary. I mean, Kenichi, is it?
Kenichi Shida.
Kenichi Shida. He's taken over, and like Tabata isn't really needed anymore. Like they do this quite a bit with games. Like, I mean, Taisui really like takes over from Nomura when things kind of start moving on in the Kingdom Hearts series, so it's not really that dissimilar. I mean, Tabata has to focus on, he's like their second boy, like he has to focus on the next big thing. And
I'm sorry to say, Ben, but Final Fantasy 13 was the worst selling launch game. So Final Fantasy, whenever a Final Fantasy game launches on a console, it's usually the best selling of that generation. Final Fantasy 13 was the worst selling.
And if you think that it doesn't get as much hate as, like, whatever, the amount of times I've seen conversations where Final Fantasy 13 is referred to as the worst game in the series, they hate it beyond belief, they think that it's trash, they think that the characters are awful, and all that sort of stuff, like, it's pretty big. It's pretty big.
I think it's managed to sell okay now with the PC release and everything, but like originally it sold like 6 million, which compared to Final Fantasy 10, which had sold like 8.5, 9, and Final Fantasy 7, which had sold like 9 to 10. Yeah, but that's the thing, Ben. Like 5 million copies for like the first Final Fantasy game on a console was bad. That was bad. And yeah, like Final Fantasy 13 Part 2 it halved, and then I think Lightning Returns barely even sold 1 million.
And yeah, Jin, that's what's so great about Final Fantasy 13 as well, is that the fact that the characters do grow. They're more than just their initial parts. Like they have growth.
Final Fantasy 10 was selling Final Fantasy 10 has sold well over 10 million copies. Combined 10 and 10-2 are on 14 million now with the remaster. But 10 originally was 8 million.
And also don't forget that 10 was massively delayed between things as well.
I don't know if I want to see necessarily alternate costumes and skins in Dissidia. I just want to see new characters. I want to see characters that we haven't seen before in the Dissidia franchise.
I want my Seymour.
I think with Final Fantasy 13 they tried to do something different. They were going into the HD generation and they really wanted to focus. And if you think about the older games, there was typically a much larger cast. With Final Fantasy 12 they cut it down to 6 characters, and I think the game kind of struggles as a result of that. And with Final Fantasy 13 they did the same thing. They only had 6 characters and they tried to give each of them the same amount of screen time. And they each had to have their story arcs. They each had to have their development. And the problem was with the older games, you had the main character, and there was typically a foil for that main character, and the side characters had their own story arcs, but they were isolated. Barrett had his story arc in Coral. He didn't really have too much else. Once their kind of thing was done, they were done. Sid obviously had his thing with the Rocket Town, with the going into space, but outside of that, he didn't really have much involvement. Whereas with Final Fantasy 13, they tried to give each of them their individual focus. I think the one that probably got the least was SARS. But like I think as a result, like there was Lightning is the main character of Final Fantasy 13. Like that's pretty clear. But the other characters, there wasn't a strong enough focus on her and her story because it was about the collective. And I think that's kind of where it wasn't as strong.
On the topic of like Final Fantasy as we know it is dead, it's not necessarily that. It's that Final Fantasy hasn't had an original title that hasn't had some kind of development problem in like years. Like, I mean, even Final Fantasy X had like sort of composer trouble. Final Fantasy 12 had massive drama between the stories, like handing it over to different directors. Final Fantasy 13 was planned. Well, did they do it with the sequel in mind, or what were they doing? No, they didn't. But like, I mean, Final Fantasy 15 was also.
Well, you just got to look at the concept of Final Fantasy 13 Part 2. It's like, alternate timeline.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's very true. Anyways, ignore that bit. But like with Final Fantasy 15, like it was a game that was in development hell. All they need is a Final Fantasy game that is actually fleshed out, is focused on one director's vision, and just isn't in development hell. That's all they need. They just need one original, and they haven't done that for like a long time. Everything's sort of been, all right, well, you know, we haven't released this game yet, but like let's just patch it all together and make it nice and then serve it to people. And I think we really just need an original game again. We just need one new game. It doesn't even have to be original. They could just freaking, you know, The Force Awakens it and just regurgitate the same story from a previous game with shiny new characters and stuff, and I would be happy as long as it was good. They could like do a new version of Final Fantasy 4 and I would be sold.
Would you?
Well, if it was like not Final Fantasy 4, it was Final Fantasy 16 in Final Fantasy 4 clothing. I think that would be a pretty sick story, to be fair.
Yeah, Final Fantasy 13 did also have issues. It was supposed to be releasing on the PlayStation 2 and like all this stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
They changed engines. They did like...
They've had a lot of problems. And I'm sure that they'll continue to have these problems because, I mean, with Final Fantasy 7 Remake, it's gonna probably be close in line with the PlayStation 5 whenever that comes out. But anyways, we really have to get to bed. I mean, it's 10:30 almost, and I'm feeling it. But yeah, but I love you guys, and yeah, it was nice to talk to you all.
Yeah, sorry about the original problems that we had. We had to start like 20 minutes late and stuff. Yeah, we'll see you next week, hopefully. Well, obviously, Gamescom, it's going to be fun. We probably won't be doing any live streams for Gamescom, but we'll be here next week to discuss everything that happens during Gamescom, which I'm sure is going to be thoroughly interesting.
Yeah. I've been sort of talking to Daryl about it, but I have some plans to maybe do some playthroughs, but I'm still kind of like umming and ahhing about it. I have to check if we have the technology to do it, but if you guys would be interested in that, I might do that during Allie's nap time.
We will see.
We will see. We'll work it out.
Do you want to throw a link to our Patreon in the...
I will. Yes, please check out our Patreon. I have some badges to send out. I think on the podcast one, I will check the FF Union one to see if we have anything.
Aww.
I'm sorry.
Be sure to hit the like button before you
like button and subscribe if you haven't already, in order to make sure that you never miss a stream.
Alright guys, we will see you next week, and we'll hopefully be putting some videos out in the week. Tomorrow actually, we're going to put a video talking about who everyone in the survey voted for as the director they would want to see working on Final Fantasy 16. It's going to be very interesting. Yeah. And yeah, we will see you soon.